I've held a lot of guns in my time. Blasters that could melt through starship hulls. Slug throwers that could punch a hole through a man at 500 paces. Even a sonic disruptor that could turn your insides to soup without breaking the skin. But I'd never held anything like the ancient piece I found in Dustwell Station's junk quarter. It was a plasma revolver, a Caldwell Peacekeeper. 6 chambers. Genuine wooden grip worn smooth by decades of use. The barrel was etched with scrollwork that had faded with time, but you could still make out the craftsmanship. They didn't make weapons like this anymore. Not with soul. How much? I asked the junk merchant, a wizened Phaedron with 3 good eyes and skin like cracked leather. For you, Holt? 300 credits. His voice was like gravel in a tin can. I snorted. It's probably not even functional. 150. This is a collector's piece. 275. 200 flat. And I won't tell anyone about those modified core world comms units you're hiding under the counter. The merchant's middle eye narrowed to a slit. You drive a hard bargain. 200 it is. I transferred the credits, feeling the familiar pang of watching my funds dwindle. Work had been scarce lately. The drought had hit Dustwell hard, and when people are thirsty, they're less inclined to pay bounties, and more inclined to kill their own problems. The revolver felt right in my hand as I slipped it into my holster. Heavier than my usual sidearm, but balanced. I'd need to find some plasma cartridges, but those weren't too hard to come by if you knew where to look. The old weapons used standardized cells, unlike the proprietary garbage they pushed these days. I stepped out into the blistering heat of Dustwell's main thoroughfare. The twin suns beat down mercilessly, casting double shadows that stretched like hungry ghosts across the packed dirt. Dust devils swirled between the ramshackle buildings, and the air smelled of sweat, spice, and the acrid tang of ship fuel. My lodgings were on the outskirts of town, a small room above a cantina called the Broken Orbit. It wasn't much, but it kept the sand out, and the roof didn't leak when the rare rains came. I'd been calling it home for 3 months now, longer than I usually stayed in one place. The cantina was quiet when I entered, just a few regulars nursing drinks and a table of off-worlders playing cards in the corner. I nodded to Bricks, the bartender, and headed upstairs. My room was sparse: a bed, a desk, a trunk for my belongings, and a small window that looked out over the endless desert. I sat at the desk and pulled out the revolver, intent on cleaning it properly. It was then that I noticed something odd about the grip, a small seam that shouldn't have been there. I pressed it, and a hidden compartment popped open. Inside was a single plasma cartridge, glowing with a faint blue light, old but still charged. I rolled it between my fingers, feeling the hum of energy. These things were supposed to degrade over time, but this one seemed perfectly preserved. Curious, I loaded it into one of the chambers, then spun the cylinder. The mechanism was smooth, well-oiled despite its age. I aimed at the wall, finger hovering over the trigger. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. I whipped around, the revolver still in my hand, scanning the empty room. Who's there? I demanded. The name's Thorne. Lieutenant Commander Soren Thorne, Talon Division, 33rd Reconnaissance Unit. I turned in a slow circle, the hair on the back of my neck standing up. Show yourself. Can't. Not in the traditional sense, anyway. The voice seemed to be coming from the gun itself. I held it up, examining it with newfound wariness. You're in the revolver? What's left of me, yes. The voice had a strange, echoing quality, but it was unmistakably human. Male, with an accent I couldn't quite place. My consciousness was uploaded during the final days of the Syndicate uprising, Emergency protocol for high-ranking officers with critical mission data. I'd heard stories about consciousness transfers, rich core worlders uploading themselves into new bodies when their old ones wore out. But into a weapon, that was new. You expect me to believe that? Believe what you want. But you're holding the only surviving record of Operation Starfall. And if you don't help me complete my mission, a lot of innocent people are going to die. I snorted. The Syndicate uprising ended 15 years ago. Whatever mission you had is ancient history. That's where you're wrong. The voice, Thorn, grew more urgent. The uprising was just the beginning. The real threat is still out there, dormant, but not dead. And it's about to wake up. I should have put the gun down right then. Should have sold it to the next collector who passed through town and forgotten all about Lieutenant Commander Thorn and his unfinished mission. But curiosity has always been my weakness. What kind of threat? The kind that makes the Crimson Horizon incident look like a picnic. The reference sent a chill down my spine. Everyone knew about that catastrophe. An entire colony transformed into something not human. I need to get to Black Bar Canyon. There's a facility there, hidden in the deepest part of the asteroid field. That's where they're keeping it. Keeping what? The Harbinger Protocol, a bioweapon designed to target specific genetic markers. The Syndicate developed it as a last resort, a way to wipe out their enemies without destroying infrastructure. My team was sent to destroy it, but the voice faltered. I'm the only one who made it out, and even then, only like this. I set the revolver down on the desk, suddenly wanting distance between us. Why should I believe any of this? For all I know, you're just a sophisticated VI program designed to spin tales. Check the historical records. Look up Talon Division and the battle at Crimson Rim. I was there. We lost over 300 soldiers that day, including my commanding officer, Marshal Voss. That name I recognized. Marshal Voss was a legend among the frontier worlds, a lawbringer of uncompromising integrity who disappeared during the final days of the uprising. Rumors had circulated for years about his fate, everything from heroic sacrifice to secret rebellion. Voss sent us to Black Bar, Thorn continued. Said it was a suicide mission, but someone had to do it. He was right on both counts. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. Even if I believed you, which I don't, why me? Why now? The containment protocols on the Harbinger are set to degrade after 20 years. That's in 3 days. As for why you, the gun chose you. The gun chose me, I repeated flatly. This weapon is more than it appears. It's Talon Division tech, designed to seek out compatible operators. It's been waiting for someone with the right qualities. And what qualities would those be? Someone with nothing left to lose, but who hasn't given up fighting. There was a pause. Someone like you, Holt. The fact that he knew my name wasn't as surprising as it should have been. I'd given it to the junk merchant after all. If the gun could somehow listen, it would have heard. I'm not a hero, I said finally. I'm just a man trying to get by. I didn't ask for a hero. I asked for someone who could finish a job. I stared at the revolver for a long moment. Then I picked it up, feeling its weight, and holstered it again. I need to think about this. 3 days, Holt. After that, it won't matter what you decide. I spent the night tossing and turning, Thorn's words echoing in my head. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was all an elaborate hoax. Maybe the junk merchant was playing a prank, or the gun had a malfunctioning VI system that was spouting nonsense. But something nagged at me. The name Marshal Voss, the reference to the Crimson Horizon. The details were too specific, too obscure for a random scam. I made my way to Dustwell's public archives, a generous name for what amounted to a few data terminals in the back of the municipal building. The system was outdated and slow, but it connected to the sector-wide information network. I searched for Talon Division first. Not much came up, just vague references to a special operations unit active during the Syndicate uprising. Then I tried Marshal Voss and Crimson Rim together. The screen flickered, then displayed a grainy image of a tall man with a stern face and eyes that seemed to look right through you. The accompanying text was brief. Marshal Jericho Voss, commanding officer of Talon Division, presumed killed during operations at the Crimson Rim, 2189. Posthumously awarded the Star of Valor for actions that prevented the fall of 3 core worlds to Syndicate forces. I scrolled further, looking for any mention of a Lieutenant Commander Thorne, but found nothing. Either the records had been purged, or Thorne wasn't important enough to merit a mention. As I was about to give up, a notification appeared on the screen. Additional information restricted. Military clearance required. That gave me pause. If this was just a hoax, why would there be classified information attached to it? I returned to my room and pulled out the revolver. Thorne, you still in there? For a moment, there was silence, and I felt foolish talking to a gun. Then the voice returned, sounding weary. Still here. Did you find what you were looking for? Not exactly. There's mention of Talon Division and Marshal Voss, but nothing about you or this Harbinger protocol. Not surprising. Most of what we did was off the books, plausible deniability and all that. I turned the revolver over in my hands, examining it more closely. Tell me about this gun. How does it work? How are you in there? It's a Caldwell Peacekeeper, modified by Talon Division's tech team. The wooden grip contains a quantum storage device, enough space to hold a human consciousness, or what's left of one. I'm not complete, more like an echo of who I was. Core memories, mission data, basic personality. And it chose me how exactly? The grip contains biosensors. It reads genetic markers, stress levels, neural patterns. It's looking for someone with the right combination of traits, someone capable of completing the mission, but not likely to misuse what they find. I frowned. That sounds like advanced tech, even for Talon Division. We had access to resources most people couldn't imagine, some of it salvaged from pre-Exodus artifacts. The mention of the Exodus, when Earth's last survivors fled to the stars, sent another chill through me. Pre-Exodus tech was the stuff of legends, most of it lost or hoarded by the wealthiest core worlds. All right, I said finally. Let's say I believe you. What exactly would I need to do? Get to Black Bar Canyon, find the hidden facility, destroy the Harbinger protocol before it activates. That's it? Just waltz into a secret military installation and blow it up? I have access codes, facility layouts, everything you'll need. The gun will help too. The gun will help, I repeated skeptically. It's more than just a weapon. In the right hands, your hands, it can do things you wouldn't believe. I holstered the revolver again. I'll need supplies, transport. This isn't going to be cheap. There's an emergency cache near Dustwell. Talon Division maintained them across the sector. Weapons, credits, equipment. I can guide you to it. I considered my options. I was nearly broke, with no prospects on the horizon. If Thorne was telling the truth, this mission could save countless lives. If he was lying, well, I'd still potentially get my hands on a cache of military-grade equipment. One more question, I said. Why didn't you tell this to whoever had the gun before me? There was a long pause before Thorne answered. The gun's been in stasis mode, conserving power. It only activates when it finds a compatible operator. You're the first since... since I died. Something in his voice, a vulnerability, a weariness, made me believe him, or at least believe that he believed what he was saying. All right, Thorne, you've got yourself a gunslinger. Let's find that cache. The cache was hidden in an abandoned moisture farm 10 miles outside of Dustwell. The farm itself was little more than a collection of rusted equipment and collapsed buildings, long since picked clean by scavengers. But beneath the main house, accessible through a hidden hatch that Thorne guided me to, was a small bunker untouched by time. Place your palm on the scanner, Thorne instructed, as we stood before a featureless metal door. I did as he said, expecting nothing to happen. To my surprise, the scanner lit up green, and the door slid open with a hiss of escaping air. How did that work? I'm not Talon Division. The gun interfaced with the scanner. As far as the system is concerned, you're me. The bunker was small, but well stocked. Weapons racks lined one wall, holding an assortment of blasters, rifles, and explosives. Another wall held survival gear, environment suits, med kits, ration packs. In the center of the room was a table with a holographic display, currently dark. Activate the terminal, Thorne said. We need to see if there's still a ship available. I found the power switch, and the holographic display flickered to life, showing a map of the sector. Various points were marked with symbols I didn't recognize. There, Thorne said, and I felt the revolver grow warm at my hip, as if directing my attention. Hangar Facility B7, 20 miles northwest. There should be a scout ship there if no one's found it. I gathered what I could carry: a compact energy rifle, extra plasma cartridges for the revolver, a med kit, and some ration packs. There was also a Talon Division uniform, but I left that behind. Better to travel inconspicuously. As I was about to leave, something caught my eye. A small metal case tucked under the table. Inside was a set of dog tags and a faded photograph of a group of soldiers standing in front of a sleek black ship. They were all smiling, arms around each other's shoulders. "Is this you?" I asked, pointing to a tall man with dark hair and a serious expression that seemed at odds with the casual pose. "Yes," Thorne said softly. "And that's my team, the ones who didn't make it out of Black Bar." I studied the faces, young, confident, unaware of what awaited them. What were their names? Rodriguez, Chen, Okafor. Lyra Kale was our medic, toughest woman I ever met. And that's Voss, in the center. I recognized the stern-faced man from the archive photo. In this picture, though, he looked almost relaxed, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "You were close?" "Like family. In Talon Division, you had to be. We depended on each other for everything." I closed the case and tucked it into my pack. It seemed wrong to leave it behind. Let's find that ship. Hangar Facility B7 turned out to be a bunker built into the side of a mesa, its entrance concealed by a holographic projection of solid rock. Without Thorne's guidance, I would have walked right past it. "The access panel is to your right," he said, as we approached what looked like an unbroken cliff face. Same procedure as before. I found the panel hidden behind a loose rock and placed my palm on it. The hologram flickered, revealing a large metal door that slid open with a groan of protest. Inside was a cavernous space dominated by a single ship, a sleek, matte black vessel with swept-back wings and no visible markings. It was smaller than I expected, about the size of a standard cargo runner, but its lines spoke of speed and stealth rather than hauling capacity. "The Whisper," Thorne said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "Fastest scout ship in the fleet. Stealth capabilities, advanced weapons systems, and enough range to cross the sector twice without refueling." I walked around the ship, admiring its design. Will it still fly? It's been sitting here for 15 years. Talon Division vessels are designed to remain operational indefinitely. Self-maintaining systems, automated repair protocols. It'll fly. The boarding ramp lowered at my approach, and I stepped into a compact but efficient interior. The cockpit was at the front, with seating for a pilot and co-pilot. Behind that was a small common area, and further back were 4 tiny cabins and a cargo hold. I settled into the pilot's seat and placed the revolver on the console. Now what? Place your hand on the scanner to your left. The ship will recognize you as authorized personnel. Once again, the scanner accepted my palm print, and the ship's systems hummed to life. Displays lit up across the console, showing ship status, navigation charts, and weapons readiness. I don't suppose you know how to fly this thing? I asked. I do, but I can't exactly take the controls. The basics aren't that different from civilian craft. The automated systems will handle the complex stuff. I'd flown various ships over the years, mostly beat-up transports and the occasional stolen luxury vessel, but nothing military grade. Still, as Thorne had said, the fundamentals were similar enough. With his guidance, I managed to power up the engines, disengage the docking clamps, and guide the Whisper out of the hangar. Once we were clear of the mesa, I pointed the nose skyward and hit the thrusters. The acceleration pushed me back into the seat as we shot upward, the blue sky darkening to black in minutes. There was none of the shuddering or straining I was used to with civilian ships, just smooth, relentless power. Set course for Black Bar Canyon, Thorne said once we'd broken atmosphere. The navigation system should still have the coordinates. I found the nav computer and pulled up the stored destinations. Black Bar Canyon was there, along with dozens of other locations across the sector, most with names that meant nothing to me. How long will it take us to get there? At maximum speed, about 30 hours. The Whisper has a modified FTL drive that can cut through the outer rails like they're not even there. I engaged the FTL drive, and the stars outside the viewport stretched into lines of light before being replaced by the swirling blue-black of hyperspace. With the ship on autopilot, I had time to think, and to ask questions. I retrieved the revolver from the console and turned it over in my hands. "Tell me about the mission," I said. "The one that killed you." Thorne was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, as if he were looking back through a fog. "It was supposed to be simple. Get in, destroy the Harbinger, get out. We had intel on the facility layout, security protocols, everything. But the intel was wrong. The Syndicate knew we were coming." "A trap? Or a leak? We never found out which. We made it to the central lab, but the Harbinger wasn't there. Instead, there was something else. A prototype. Earlier version, maybe. It activated as soon as we breached the containment field." "What happened?" "It was like a mist, but alive. Intelligent. It went for Rodriguez first. I watched him change. His skin hardened, turned crystalline. Then Chen, Okafor. Lyra managed to seal herself in a side lab, but the mist seeped through the ventilation system. The revolver grew warm in my hand, as if the memories were generating physical heat. Voss and I made it to the command center. He ordered me to upload what we'd learned and escape with the data. Said someone had to warn the core worlds. I was at the transfer station when the mist found us. Voss, he bought me time. Held them off while my consciousness was uploaded into the gun. And then nothing. My next clear memory is hearing your voice in that room in Dustwell. 15 years of darkness. I tried to imagine it. 15 years of isolation, of being neither alive nor dead, trapped in a weapon passed from hand to hand. It was a fate worse than death. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Don't be. If it worked, If I can complete the mission, it will have been worth it. We lapsed into silence after that. I checked the ship's systems, familiarized myself with the weapons and emergency protocols, and tried to get some rest. But sleep was elusive. My mind too full of Thorn's story and what awaited us at Black Bar Canyon. 28 hours later, the Whisper dropped out of hyperspace near the Black Bar system. The canyon itself was a massive asteroid field, the remains of a shattered moon that had once orbited the gas giant Hephaestus. The asteroids ranged in size from tiny pebbles to chunks larger than most starships, all of them spinning slowly in a complex dance of gravity and momentum. The facility is hidden in the largest asteroid, near the center of the field, Thorn said, as I guided the ship toward the debris. The Whisper's sensors should be able to pinpoint it once we're closer. Navigating the canyon was like threading a needle while blindfolded. Even with the ship's advanced sensors and Thorn's guidance, I had several close calls with asteroids that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The further in we went, the denser the field became, until it felt like we were flying through a solid wall of rock, with only narrow gaps to squeeze through. "There," Thorn said suddenly. "That's it." Ahead of us loomed an asteroid larger than all the others, roughly spherical and pitted with craters. At first glance, it looked no different from its neighbors, but as we drew closer, I could make out artificial structures embedded in its surface. Antennae, sensor arrays, and what looked like weapon emplacements, all dark and seemingly inactive. "Are those defenses still operational?" I asked, eyeing the gun turrets. "Unknown, but the Whisper's stealth systems should keep us off their scopes if they are." I guided the ship toward a large crater on the asteroid's dark side. According to Thorn, it concealed a hangar bay used for covert arrivals. "The entrance should be right. There." He directed my attention to what looked like a solid rock face at the crater's center. "Transmitting access codes now." The revolver pulsed with energy, and I felt a strange sensation, as if something were flowing from it into the ship's communications array. A moment later, a seam appeared in the rock face, widening into a doorway large enough for the Whisper to pass through. I eased the ship forward, half expecting automated defenses to open fire. But we entered the hangar without incident, the door sliding shut behind us, with a finality that made my stomach clench. The hangar was vast and dark, illuminated only by the Whisper's external lights. Several other ships were docked there. Small, sleek vessels similar to ours, covered in dust and showing signs of battle damage. "Talon division ships," Thorn confirmed. "Probably from failed extraction attempts after my mission." I set the Whisper down in an empty docking bay and powered down the engines. The sudden silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional ping of cooling metal. "What now?" I asked, retrieving the revolver and securing it in my holster. "Now we find the central lab and destroy the Harbinger. I'll guide you through the facility." I gathered my gear, the energy rifle, a portable scanner Thorn had me configure to detect the specific energy signature of the Harbinger, and a pack of explosives from the ship's armory. Then I descended the boarding ramp, stepping onto the dusty floor of an installation that had claimed the lives of Thorn's entire team. The air was stale but breathable, suggesting that life support systems were still functioning at minimal levels. Emergency lighting cast a dim red glow over everything, creating long shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. "The main corridor is to your right," Thorn said, his voice oddly muted in the cavernous space. "We need to reach the central elevator shaft. From there, we can access the lower levels where the Harbinger is stored." I moved cautiously, rifle at the ready, every sense alert for signs of danger. The corridor was wide enough for 3 people to walk abreast, its walls made of the same dark metal as the hangar. Doors lined both sides, most of them sealed shut. What's behind these doors? I asked, pausing to examine one. Research labs, mostly. Some living quarters for the scientists. Nothing we need to concern ourselves with. I continued down the corridor, following Thorne's directions at each intersection. The facility was larger than I'd expected. A maze of corridors and chambers that all looked unsettlingly similar. How much farther to the elevator? Not far. 2 more turns and we should... Thorne broke off suddenly. Wait, do you hear that? I stopped, listening intently. At first, there was nothing but the soft hum of distant machinery. Then I heard it. A faint skittering sound, like many small objects moving across metal. What is that? I whispered, bringing the rifle up. I don't know, but it's not good. Move faster. I picked up the pace, no longer concerned with stealth. The skittering grew louder, seeming to come from all directions at once. As I rounded the next corner, I saw the elevator, a large platform surrounded by a safety railing, positioned over a shaft that disappeared into darkness below. And surrounding the elevator, covering the floor, walls, and ceiling, were hundreds of crystalline growths. They ranged in size from tiny shards to formations as large as my fist, and they were moving, sliding across the surfaces like living things. Thorne, I said, my mouth suddenly dry. What am I looking at? The prototype, he replied, his voice tight with what might have been fear. What it did to Rodriguez and the others, it's still active. As if in response to his words, the crystals nearest to us suddenly oriented in our direction, like flowers turning toward the sun. Then they began to move toward us, picking up speed. Run! Thorne shouted. Get to the elevator! Don't let them touch you! I sprinted forward, firing the rifle at the largest crystal formations. The energy blasts shattered them, sending fragments flying, but for each one I destroyed, a dozen more seemed to take its place. I reached the elevator platform, just as the first wave of crystals arrived at its base. They began to climb the support struts, their movement more purposeful now, as if they sensed prey. The control panel, Thorne directed. Enter code 7734. I found the panel and punched in the numbers with shaking fingers. The platform lurched, then began to descend into the shaft. Crystals continued to pour over the edge, forcing me to retreat to the center of the platform. What happens if they touch me? I asked, watching the advancing crystalline tide with horrified fascination. They'll try to convert you, turn your organic matter into more of themselves. It's not a pleasant process. I fired the rifle again, clearing a space around me, but it was a losing battle. There were too many, and my weapon's charge wouldn't last forever. We're almost to the lower level, Thorne said. Be ready to move as soon as the platform stops. The elevator descended into a large chamber that appeared to be some kind of central hub. Multiple corridors branched off from it, each marked with symbols I didn't recognize. Unlike the upper levels, this area was well lit, the walls gleaming as if recently cleaned. The platform came to a stop, and I leapt off, narrowly avoiding a crystal that had been inches from my boot. I sprinted toward the nearest corridor, guided by Thorne's urgent directions. Left here! Now right! The lab should be at the end of this hallway! I skidded to a halt before a massive set of double doors, marked with hazard symbols in multiple languages. A control panel beside it glowed with a soft blue light. Place the gun against the panel, Thorne instructed. I pressed the revolver to the surface, and again felt that strange flow of energy. The panel beeped, turned green, and the doors slid open. Beyond was a laboratory that dwarfed any I had seen before. The ceiling soared at least 30 feet high, and the room stretched so far that its far end was lost in shadow. Banks of equipment lined the walls, their displays flickering with data. In the center of the room was a raised platform, and on it, a cylindrical container about the size of a man, made of what looked like glass, but was surely something far stronger. Inside the cylinder was a swirling mass of silver-gray particles, constantly shifting and reforming, like a storm cloud in miniature. "The Harbinger," Thorne said, his voice hushed, just as the reports described it. I approached cautiously, the scanner in my hand registering energy levels that made its display flash warnings. "How do we destroy it?" "The containment field is controlled from that terminal." Thorne directed my attention to a workstation near the cylinder. "We need to overload it, force a breach that will cause the Harbinger to destabilize." I moved to the terminal and placed the revolver beside it. "Tell me what to do." Under Thorne's guidance, I navigated through security protocols and system menus, gradually gaining access to the containment field controls. The work was painstaking, each step requiring precise inputs and timing. "We're almost there," Thorne said after what felt like hours. "One more sequence and—" A loud bang echoed through the lab as the doors we'd entered through were forced open. I spun around, rifle raised, to see a figure standing in the doorway. A woman in a tattered Talon Division uniform, her skin partially crystallized, one eye replaced by a faceted gemstone that gleamed in the lab's harsh light. "Lyra," Thorne whispered, shock evident in his voice. "You're alive." The woman, or what had once been a woman, tilted her head at an unnatural angle. When she spoke, her voice was a discordant harmony of human tones and crystalline resonance. "Not Lyra anymore. We are more now, better." She took a step forward, and I noticed that her movements were jerky, as if she were a puppet controlled by unseen strings. "You came back, Thorne. You brought us a new friend." "Stay back," I warned, aiming the rifle at her chest. "Holt, wait," Thorne said. "That's still Lyra in there somewhere. She was my friend." The crystallized woman continued to advance. "We've been waiting. The Harbinger is almost ready. Soon it will cleanse the sector, make everything pure. Like us." "That's not Lyra talking," Thorne said, his voice hardening. "That's the prototype, using her memories, her voice. The real Lyra would never want this." I kept the rifle trained on her, backing toward the terminal. "What do I do?" "Finish the sequence. I'll handle Lyra." I turned back to the terminal, fingers flying over the controls as Thorne dictated the final commands. Behind me, I could hear the crystallized woman moving closer. "Soren," she said, using Thorne's first name. "Don't you remember? You promised you'd come back for me. You promised none of us would be left behind." "I know, Lyra," Thorne replied, his voice cracking with emotion. "And I'm keeping that promise now. I'm setting you free." I hit the final command, and alarms began to blare throughout the lab. The containment field around the Harbinger flickered, energy arcing between the cylinder and nearby equipment. "Field destabilizing," an automated voice announced. "Catastrophic failure imminent. Evacuate immediately." "We need to go," I said, grabbing the revolver and turning to face the crystallized woman who had stopped a few paces away. "No," she said, her human eye widening in what might have been fear. "You can't destroy it. It's our future, the next step in evolution." "It's a weapon, Lyra," Thorne said gently. "A terrible weapon that would kill billions. This isn't what you fought for." For a moment, something like recognition flickered across her face. Then it hardened into a mask of rage. "If we can't have it, no one will." She lunged forward, crystalline hands outstretched. I fired the rifle without thinking. The energy blast caught her square in the chest, shattering the crystals that had grown there and throwing her backward. She hit the ground and lay still, the remaining human parts of her body limp and lifeless. "I'm sorry," I whispered, not sure if I was apologizing to her or to Thorn. She was already gone, Thorn said, though I could hear the grief in his voice. The real Lyra died 15 years ago. Let's go. I ran for the exit, the alarms growing more urgent behind me. The corridor outside was clear of crystals, but I could hear the skittering sound in the distance, growing louder. The elevator's compromised, Thorn said. We need another way out. Any suggestions? Emergency shaft, 3 corridors over. It leads directly to the surface. I followed his directions, running through the maze-like facility as the alarms continued to wail. The emergency shaft turned out to be a narrow tube, with a ladder built into one wall, stretching up into darkness. How far to the surface? I asked, looking up doubtfully. About 500 feet. Better start climbing. I holstered the revolver and began to ascend, my muscles protesting after the day's exertions. Below me, I could hear the skittering growing louder, the crystals converging on our position. They're coming, I grunted, climbing faster. Keep going. We don't have much time before the containment field fails completely. I climbed until my arms burned, and my breath came in ragged gasps. The shaft seemed endless, each rung of the ladder identical to the last. Below, the skittering had become a roar, the crystals climbing the walls of the shaft in pursuit. Finally, I saw light above, a hatch at the top of the shaft, illuminated by what looked like natural sunlight. With a final surge of effort, I reached it and spun the wheel that held it closed. The hatch swung open, and I pulled myself up onto the surface of the asteroid. I was in a small crater, different from the one where we'd landed the Whisper. The stars wheeled overhead, and the gas giant Hephaestus loomed on the horizon, its swirling storms visible even from this distance. Which way to the ship? I asked, getting my bearings. North, about a mile. Follow the ridge. I set off at a jog, keenly aware that time was running out. The ground beneath my feet trembled occasionally, the first signs of the catastrophic reaction building below. I had covered about half the distance when the first explosion hit. The asteroid shuddered violently, nearly throwing me off my feet. A plume of dust and debris erupted from a crater to my right, followed by a shockwave that I felt, rather than heard in the vacuum of space. Run, Thorn urged. The chain reaction is starting. I broke into a sprint, ignoring the burning in my lungs and the tremors that were now coming in rapid succession. Ahead, I could see the crater where we'd landed, the entrance to the hidden hangar now visible as the holographic camouflage flickered and failed. I reached the hangar just as another explosion rocked the asteroid, this one powerful enough to crack the floor of the hangar itself. The Whisper sat where we'd left it, seemingly undamaged. I raced up the boarding ramp and threw myself into the pilot's seat. Power up, Thorn shouted. We've got minutes at most. I activated the engines, not bothering with the pre-flight checks. The ship hummed to life, systems coming online as I disengaged the docking clamps and lifted off. The hangar door was still open, the holographic disguise completely gone now. I guided the Whisper through it and out into space, accelerating hard to put distance between us and the asteroid. Behind us, explosions continued to ripple across the surface of the massive rock, each one larger than the last. The smaller asteroids in the field were being pushed outward by the force, creating a chaotic, expanding cloud of debris. We need to get clear of the field before the final detonation, Thorn said. The Harbinger's energy signature suggests it will be substantial. I pushed the Whisper to its limits, weaving through the asteroid field with more luck than skill. Debris bounced off the hull, and several larger impacts set warning lights flashing across the console. Almost clear, I muttered, more to myself than to Thorn. Almost. The world went white. A blast of pure energy washed over the ship, overloading sensors and temporarily blinding me. The Whisper tumbled end over end, its stabilizers overwhelmed by the force of the explosion. I fought with the controls, trying to regain some semblance of control as the ship spun through space. Gradually, the stabilizers reasserted themselves, and I managed to level out our flight path. When my vision cleared, I looked back toward where Black Bar Canyon had been. In its place was an expanding cloud of dust and energy. The larger asteroids reduced to fragments, the smaller ones simply gone. At the center, where the facility had been, was a pulsing core of light that seemed to bend space around it. "We did it," Thorne said quietly. "The Harbinger is destroyed." I sat back in the pilot's seat, suddenly exhausted. What was that light? At the center? Quantum destabilization. The Harbinger was designed to manipulate matter at the subatomic level. When the containment field collapsed, it created a temporary rupture in space-time. Will it spread? No, it's already collapsing in on itself. In a few hours, there will be nothing left but a new asteroid field. I set a course away from the destruction, not particularly caring where we went, as long as it was far from here. The ship's automated systems took over, guiding us into a stable orbit around Hephaestus, while I tried to process everything that had happened. "So that's it?" I asked finally. "Mission accomplished?" "Mission accomplished," Thorne confirmed. "After 15 years, it's finally over." There was something in his voice, a finality that made me look down at the revolver, still holstered at my hip. "What happens to you now?" "Now? I complete the mission parameters. All of them." "What does that mean?" "The consciousness transfer was never meant to be permanent, Holt. It was an emergency measure, a way to preserve critical mission data. Now that the data has been delivered, the protocol calls for termination of the stored consciousness." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. "You're going to die? Again?" "I've been dead for 15 years. This is just making it official. There has to be another option. We could find someone who understands this technology. Maybe transfer you to a more permanent—" "No," Thorne interrupted. "This is how it has to be. The technology is too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. And besides—" He paused. "I'm tired, Holt. 15 years in darkness, holding on to a mission, a purpose. Now that it's done, I'm ready to rest." I wanted to argue, to find some way to save him, but I understood. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is let go. What do I need to do? There's a sequence, a code phrase that will initiate the final protocol. All you have to do is say it. I drew the revolver and held it in front of me, looking at it as if I might somehow see Thorne's face reflected in its surface. "What's the phrase?" "Mission complete, soldier. Stand down." Simple words. A military dismissal. The end of a duty fulfilled. "Is there anything else you want to say? Before—" Thorne was quiet for a moment. "Just thank you for helping me finish what we started, for making sure my team didn't die in vain." I nodded, throat tight with unexpected emotion. "It was an honor, Lieutenant Commander." "The honor was mine, Holt. And one more thing. The gun is yours now. A Talon Division officer's weapon, passed to a worthy successor. Use it well." I took a deep breath, then spoke the words that would set him free. "Mission complete, soldier. Stand down." The revolver grew warm in my hand, then hot, though not enough to burn. A soft blue light emanated from between the wooden grip panels, pulsing like a heartbeat. It grew brighter, more intense, until I had to squint against the glare. Then, slowly, it faded. The gun cooled in my palm, becoming just a weapon again, a finely crafted antique with a history few would ever know. "Thorne," I said quietly, but there was no response. He was gone. I holstered the revolver with care, feeling its weight against my hip. Familiar now. Comforting. in a strange way. Outside the viewport, the gas giant Hephaestus turned slowly, its storms painting swirls of orange and gold across its surface. In the distance, the dust cloud that had been Black Bar Canyon continued to expand, carrying with it the remains of a weapon that would never threaten the sector, and the final resting place of Talon Division's last mission. I set a course for Dustwell Station. I had a story to tell. Not the whole truth, perhaps, but enough to warn others about what had been hidden in Black Bar Canyon. Someone should know what Thorne and his team had sacrificed. And after that, the Outer Rim was vast, full of forgotten places and untold stories. With the Whisper and Thorne's revolver, I could go anywhere, do anything. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. Thorne had passed his mission to me, not just destroying the Harbinger, but protecting the Rim from threats others couldn't or wouldn't face. It was a heavy responsibility. But as I felt the weight of the revolver at my side, I knew I wouldn't be facing it alone. Not really. Some ghosts, it turns out, are worth keeping close.